show. Welcome back to Anti-War Radio, Chaos 92.7 FM in Austin, Texas. We're streaming live worldwide online, chaosradioaustin.org and antiwar.com/radio. And it's my pleasure, my honor, to welcome back to the show Joe Lauria. We just talked with him a couple of weeks ago about his series that he co-authored for the Sunday Times of London about the Sibel Edmonds case. And he's a regular blogger over at the Huffington Post, where he's got a profile of one Randy Scheunemann, a man that Joe calls the personification of the military-industrial racket. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Scott.
It's good to have you back on here. The personification of the military-industrial racket. Wow, that's quite an honor of a high level of a title you're bestowing upon this guy here.
I have a new term for him. He's a wet dream for conspiracy theorists.
Oh, really?
Or as I had the honor of interviewing Gore Vidal last year, and he said he wasn't a conspiracy theorist, he was a conspiracy analyst.
Yeah, there you go.
So I mean, this guy, as I said in the piece in the Huffington Post, some people still deny that there is this nexus between the military industries and the Pentagon and foreign governments and the White House.
They do?
And it's a cliche, the military-industrial complex. I try to avoid using that term because it's been played out and discredited. But the fact that it represents certainly isn't. And Mr. Scheunemann is the proof, the living, breathing proof, by his very ties that he has to the Pentagon, to the military industries, to oil companies, and to a leading presidential candidate, John McCain, for whom he's the leading foreign policy advisor.
Leading foreign policy advisor. He is
the chief foreign policy advisor of John McCain, and nobody really knows about this guy, and he needs to be talked about. He needs to become front and center of the reporting on John McCain, without question. And we're seeing, because of the conflict in Georgia, some good reporting coming out, including a piece 2 days ago in the Washington Post. But so little is known about him, Scott, that in the research I've been doing, I still can't find out where he was born or when he was born. He's in his mid-40s. He graduated from the University of Minnesota. Then he did graduate work at Tufts. I assume he didn't get a master's degree at Tufts University in Boston. And in 1986, he gravitated to Capitol Hill. He started to work on in the House side as an aide. And by 93, he was a staffer for Bob Dole. He worked on Dole's 96 presidential campaign. And after that, he started to work for Trent Lott. He helped draft at that time for Lott in the late 90s, the 1998
Iraq Liberation Act.
Exactly, which gave $98 million to Ahmed Chalbi. I should say that a year before that, he became a founding member of the Project for New American Century, which I'm sure your listeners don't need any introduction to. And at the time he did the INC, Iraqi National Congress Liberation Act, he became very close to Ahmed Chalbi. And in 1999, the year later, he started Orient Strategies. It's a two-man operation. His partner is Mike Mitchell. And this is offices that are located at 1918 Pennsylvania Avenue, southeastern Washington, which happen to be the former offices of the Iraq National Congress. And he also used them to set up in 2003 the Committee for the Liberation of Iraq. But I'm getting ahead of myself because as a director of the Project for New American Century, he signed the letter that Crystal had written. First, the one they sent to Bill Clinton saying that he should overthrow Saddam. And then the one right after 9/11 on September 20th that telling the Bush administration that he should go directly, that the Bush administration should overthrow Saddam as a result of 9/11. And we know from Ron Susskind's book on Paul O'Neill that the very first National Security Council meeting in late January 2001, right after the inauguration of George W. Bush, the first thing they talked about was the overthrow of Saddam. So right after that, Mr. Scheunemann went to work inside the Pentagon for Donald Rumsfeld as his consultant on Iraq. But he left that job to set up the Committee for the Liberation of Iraq, in which he was the founder and president. And as I said, that worked out of the offices of the Iraqi National Congress. And he is known then to have been the leader of the White House's public relations campaign to drum up support for the war, for the invasion of Iraq. And,
now, let me stop you right there. This committee for the liberation of Iraq, this was that same thing set up with Bruce Jackson from Lockheed, right?
That's correct. Yes, there is a link there.
And they were the guys who pushed not so much the weapons of mass destruction, but the David Koresh line, he's bad to his own people. That's why we got to get him.
Well, it kept changing. That was one of the lines, yes. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
We have to get him. He's a bad guy. This is humanitarian intervention. All a bunch of garbage. But they were able to successfully lobby Congress and the media, and ultimately the public was fooled, as we know. But what's interesting is, after the invasion, he suddenly shows up as the executive consultant for a group called the World Strategic Energy, which was telling prospective investors in a booklet that Scheunemann could help them win oil contracts in Iraq because he had been such a key player in getting the U.S. to be involved there. And this brochure says that he coordinated the White House's outside the government PR campaign. Now,
is any of this against the law anymore?
No. Well, that's a very good point you make, Scott, because none of this, as far as I can tell, is against the law.
I mean, it sounds like basic insider trading type stuff, you know?
In Wall Street, that would be against the law. And frankly, this guy, Scheunemann, is really not all that bright, I think, in politics, as the neocons are. And they have turned politics into business, and business is politics. There's a good piece by Thomas Frank in the last issue of Harper's about his new book, Wrecking Crew. She clearly shows that the neocons have turned politics purely into business. Mm-hmm. And this is what this man's all about, making money for his clients, which happen to be foreign governments, and we'll talk a little bit about that, about his representation of Georgia in particular.
Sure.
Foreign governments, oil companies, arms manufacturers, the NRA, in addition to that. And who is helped by the invasion of Iraq? The American people have not been helped. Certainly the soldiers have lost their lives and their grieving families back here in the States. The Iraqi people have not benefited from this.
Osama's done pretty well.
Sorry?
Osama's done pretty well. Sorry.
Yeah, that's right. I guess Scheunemann is a lobbyist for Osama, too, in a way.
Yeah, might be.
The oil companies and the arms manufacturers, the very people Scheunemann lobbies for and represents, they have enriched themselves. He takes a cut, so he's enriched himself. So his business is war and selling war, and he's advising the potential next president of the United States, who we would hope would be a statesman to try to solve international problems, not to stir them up, whip them up into armed conflict. This is what Randy Scheunemann does for a living. This is what he's telling John McCain to do. And McCain is a seller of wars, or a monger of wars.
Yeah, see, that's the thing, is John McCain loves war anyway, but I think it used to be accepted, and probably correctly, I guess, that John McCain had a mind of his own, but it seems more and more that he doesn't know where the line is to stop ceding his decision-making and beliefs over to other people. I mean, he's just completely written off his own mind in favor of whatever the GOP wants him to say now.
I don't know. Maybe he really believes some of this stuff. Let's go back. We've established that Randy Scheunemann is a leading neocon. Project New American Century, etc. There's no doubt about that. Dyed-in-the-wool neoconservative. In 2000, he advised McCain. He is now his chief foreign policy advisor. Couldn't you conclude that McCain is indeed a neoconservative? He may have been a paleoconservative out of the mold of Goldwater at one time, but he is a neoconservative now. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And we can see on Georgia, this is such an important connection again with McCain, because on this is a story the Washington Post did 2 days ago. On April 17, 2008, McCain had a phone conversation with President Saakashvili about South Ossetia and Abkhazia, which was set up by Randy Scheunemann, the phone call, according to the Washington Post. When McCain hung up the phone, he read out a statement written by Randy Scheunemann of support for Georgia in regaining control over those two provinces and warning Russia. This is April 17, 2008. On that same day, Orient Strategies, which is Randy Scheunemann's company, received a new contract of $200,000 from the government of Georgia.
On the very same day?
Same day.
Wow. See, I like you, Joe. You're not going to accuse me of hyperbole here, are you, when I say that McCain was basically just the unwitting intelligence asset of the Iranian spy Ahmed Chalabi, and now he's basically making himself an asset of foreign powers, it sounds like. This guy is the Manchurian candidate, not by mind control, but just by open hands. He'll turn a trick for anybody.
He's out of his mind, and he wants to extend American power violently and enrich his friends and his backers. Does that sound like George W. Bush? This is a neoconservative agenda. Randy Scheunemann is running it. Nobody knows about this guy. Not enough people know about him. And things are starting to come out. As I said, he should become front and center. Since 2004, the Washington Post reported, 71 phone calls were made by Orient Strategies to McCain on behalf of Orient Strategies or Scheunemann's foreign clients, including Georgia, Taiwan, and other governments. The guy is the nexus of the arms, oil, and foreign government. He is the nexus of the military-industrial racket, as I call it. He also worked in the Pentagon. I don't know if I mentioned that. He went to work for Rumsfeld for a while. So he has contacts there and on Capitol Hill and with oil and arms manufacturers and foreign governments. What more proof do we need? There are others like Randy Scheunemann around, but I think he's pretty much top of the heap right now in that shadowy department.
Do you know about his relationship to, say, I don't know, Richard Pearl, William Crystal?
William Crystal, sure. He was with Crystal in founding the Project for the American Century, and he signed the letters that Crystal wrote. So I know that they're very close. Pearl, I don't have any connection yet between Pearl and Scheunemann. Mm-hmm. But I did know that Scheunemann had a relationship to Stephen Payne. This is how I first got to know about Scheunemann. It was last month, Sunday Times of London. But as you know, I freelance from here in New York and work not only on the Sibel Edmonds case, I work on various other investigations for them. And I was called after they'd broken the story last month where they videotaped secretly Stephen Payne, a lobbyist, who said he would arrange for a meeting with an exiled Central Asian president from Kyrgyzstan to meet high government officials as high as Cheney, Rice, and Hadley in exchange for $700,000, $250,000 of which would go to the Bush Library. So the Sunday Times broke that story, and it became known then that Payne had been paying Scheunemann 5 out of the last 8 years. And Payne, in fact, is a director of this World Strategic Energy company that was telling investors that Scheunemann can get oil contracts for them in Iraq. Wow. So this is how I got to know about Randy Scheunemann. And I was shocked to know that he was the foreign policy advisor of John McCain.
Well, the amount of corruption here is just, well, I mean, it's always this amount, I guess, but the degree to which this is sort of just up front. I mean, as you say, you quote Right Web here from their profile of Scheunemann. He lobbied on behalf of clients included Swift Ships Shipbuilders, Barrett Firearms, British Petroleum America, Air Force Memorial Foundation, Lockheed Martin, all important, the National Shooting Sports Foundation, and Sporting Arms ammunition manufacturers, sure, probably military contractors as well. I mean, to have a lobbyist like this just straight to what, he's going to be McCain's national security advisor or something? And this is pretty blatant.
Could be, yes.
I mean, wow.
He wouldn't be Secretary of State. That's too public. Yeah, I could see him doing that. You know, you forgot BP America in that. I mean, look, the press generally, Scott, as you know, the corporate press paints a make-believe portrait of American politics to the public, and by leaving things out, not by lying, by leaving out so much information, such as, let's say, the reporting on Georgia, not even mentioning pipelines, not even putting pipelines on the maps you see in the New York Times. So, and behind this cover, this make-believe view of American politics, we have all these kinds of shady deals going down. Mm-hmm. Drug dealing, terrorism, the nuclear spying ring that I talked to you about 2 weeks ago with Sibel Edmonds. And the press never delves into this. But we're starting to see that the Washington Post, with this important story, is getting out the facts. Listen to this from the Washington Post story, if I could add that. Between January 2007 and May 15, 2008, the campaign paid Scheunemann $70,000 to provide foreign policy advice, but at the same time, Georgia was paying $290,000 in lobbying fees to him and his partner. He's got $800,000 from Georgia, so he was getting money from the Georgian government and from the campaign. And now that he's had to step down on May 15th because this started to become known, McCain said, we have new rules, you can't be a lobbyist and work for the campaign at the same time. Imagine that. It took pressure. Yeah. And to say that, he still has his partner taking money from Georgia. He'll go, you know, I mean, it's extraordinary. Mm-hmm. He's just personally removed himself from this.
Well, you know, in the larger context, I'm reminded of Andrew Coburn, his book Rumsfeld, His Rise, Fall, and Catastrophic Legacy, and of all the different debates about the neoconservative movement and what exactly it means, the influence of Trotskyism in their past, the legacy of Leo Strauss, the Rand Corporation, and all these things, Andrew Coburn narrows it down. And he says the neoconservatives is where the Israel lobby meets the military-industrial complex. It's the deal that they made. We will be the intellectual brain power for your policy. You pay us. And they struck this deal in the late 1970s, and this is what we're dealing with.
Right, and you have to add on other oligarchic, and they are really an oligarchic interest you were describing there, that puts enormous pressure on all public officials and in all elections in choosing nominees. And you forgot AIPAC, arms industry, oil and gas lobby. These are four of the big oligarchic interests that every presidential candidate must genuflect to if they have any hope of getting into the White House. And I'm afraid to say I believe that Barack Obama is doing that. Mm-hmm. And so essentially whichever candidate gets in, their bidding will be put forward, and we will see their policies implemented, and you could hardly call that a democracy. It's a theater of democracy, the representative government we have, as they're completely controlled, the Congress and the presidential candidates, by these powerful interests.
Mm-hmm. And when you think about, so the election in 1992, where Ross Perot would always talk about the special interest this and the special interest that terminology is too vague, and it's so broad it includes every kind of victims group you could imagine, every kind of pressure group you could imagine. But, special interest, what that really means is the people you're talking about, these oligarchs, these few massive corporations that are capitalized to just bazillions of dollars, that create levers of power so large that regular people coming together can't really influence them. Like you mentioned Obama and his stake in this. He flip-flopped on the telecom immunity, passed immunity, and then it came out, 2 days later, something on Glenn Greenwald's blog, that AT&T is sponsoring and basically paying the cost of the Democratic convention. They got their logo right there on the tote bag that you get when you sign up.
Unbelievable.
It's just right there in our face now.
Sold, and they get stamped the logo. I mean, then it's dishonest. There's no shame. But this term special interest is really interesting because language is so important in politics. And as Orwell pointed out in one of his books, special interest, I think, is a conservative term to talk about unions, civil rights groups, women's groups.
Right.
The people and the people without power trying to lobby, trying to play the same game with great difficulty because they just don't have the clout. And then they're put down as special interests, and they obfuscate the real special interests. But it becomes they're all mixed into one. The unions and human rights groups and organizations of citizens become equated with the power of Exxon. Well, I mean, this is absurd. And the press does not differentiate that. Why? Because the press is part of the oligarchic power. They're owned by the corporations. They push a corporate agenda, and it's done in subtle ways, not by outright lying, but by just giving a very false picture, by leaving whole aspects out, no historical context in Georgia, for example, nothing about pipelines, and they just run with statements from Condoleezza Rice that this is 1968 all over again, the Czech Republic. I mean, it's absurd. Did they report anywhere, Scott? Have you heard about the Operation Immediate Response? Do you know what that is? Immediate Response, no. Yeah. The Operation Immediate Response was a joint military exercise between the Georgian military and the United States military. Oh, from last July, from a month ago. Yeah, but I mean, Vitaly Churkin, the Russian ambassador to the UN, where I'm based as a reporter, said that ended only hours before the invasion of Southeast Asia, or the incursion into Southeast Asia, I should say. And I don't know if that's true, but it wasn't reported. It wasn't reported, and we don't even hear the absurd remarks of Zalmay Khalilzad, the American ambassador to the UN, saying the days of overthrowing government by force are over. In Europe, he added. In Europe, obviously not in the Middle East. Yeah, make sure. God, these people. Was there actually like a pregnant pause there where then he realized, I should be more specific? No, he was clear about Europe right from the start. Yeah. I haven't gotten a chance to question him. I wasn't at that particular stakeout, but next time I get a chance to question him outside the Security Council, I'm going to definitely ask him about what exactly does he mean that means it's okay still in the Middle East. Mm-hmm. Well, we just talked with Pat Buchanan about the dangerous foolishness of passing out war guarantees to all these countries in Eastern Europe. I think the number's 6 former Warsaw Pact nations and 3 former actual so-called republics of the Soviet Union have been brought into NATO. They're pushing for Georgia and Ukraine, and this is where we get back to the military-industrial complex, because from any
foreign policy wise man point of view, this is really stupid, handing out war guarantees like pieces of candy. But what it really is, and this is, I go back to Richard Cummings in his article, Lockheed Stock and Two Smoking Barrels. What this is really all about is massive welfare checks for Lockheed's stockholders. The American taxpayer pays to give weapons. Supposedly, the Eastern European countries buy them, but we all know it's the American people who pay to deploy all these weapons in Eastern European countries. And it's not for a real strategic purpose. It's not for a real great game as much as it is just to sell airplanes.
Well, no doubt about that. I mean, stupid is the key word in the last thing you just said. Randy Scheunemann, politically, is stupid. He was stupid to back an invasion of Iraq. Anybody who knew anything about Iraq knew that would be a huge blunder. He was stupid to give the green light to the Georgian troops to enter South Ossetia. Why did they do that? What possible advantage could they have gotten from starting it? Did they not know that Russia would react the way they did?
See, that's what I'm wondering.
It could be for political, electoral reasons, maybe. And I wonder about that phone call that McCain made to the president of Georgia in April. Did they discuss this possible action then? I mean, was this part of it perhaps to help McCain so that they can dupe everyone thinking the Russians are once again invading Prague in 1968 and that this is the rise of the Soviet Union again and we need a tough guy like McCain in the White House? I mean, who knows? But it's a stupid move from the actual facts on the ground.
Yeah.
Because South Ossetia now is certainly more in the Russian camp than ever before. I don't think they're going to try that again, the Georgians.
Well, that really is the question, because they had to have obviously known. They got cameras in outer space. They had to have known where the Russians were, and I guess either one, assuming that the Americans gave the green light, which I think is a pretty safe bet, one, they thought that if he just went blitzkrieg and took Ossetia overnight, that the Russians wouldn't do anything, it would be too late, and it would be some kind of great PR victory for the American empire. Then again, I think your whole thing about baiting and trying to provoke the Russians into invading just to crank up the new Cold War is just as plausible, maybe more so.
Yeah, it seems that way. Either it was complete idiocy or they knew they could trap the Russians and make them look bad in the eyes of American voters in particular.
Yeah.
That the Russians are rising again and we need McCain, a cold warrior, because it's back again.
I saw
that could be the only explanation. And there's business involved.
I saw the headline in the, I did the Google News, and I just Googled Georgia, Russia or something, and what came up was the Chicago Tribune editorial, this crisis in Georgia shows that we need John McCain.
Don't need to say any more than that. I think that this is obviously the result that they got. I heard your interview with Eric Margulis that you had, I believe, yesterday, and it was right on the mark. He mentioned he thought the Republicans had gained from this.
Mm-hmm.
So whoever benefits is who you look for whenever there's some kind of mysterious operation. And I think, Russia may have benefited back at home too, but certainly I think McCain comes out looking stronger in this, even though it's all a big lie, because we don't really know why they went in there, except we're only surmising that it had to be for these reasons.
Yeah, it really is like Bizarro World, like Just Ramondo says, where every failure for the Republicans is some kind of benefit, even when September 11th happens on their watch.
Very fun, very interesting. It's business.
Yeah, exactly. That's what they call it.
Politics as business, and business as politics. That's how they run it.
Yeah, there you go. In that new movie, War, Inc., the John Cusack movie, Ben Kingsley says, war is the improvement of investment climates by other means. That's Clausewitz for dummies.
That's good.
Yeah. All right. Hey, thanks very much for your time today, Joe.
No problem, Scott. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
All right, everybody. That's Joe Lauria. He's a freelance reporter. You can find him in the Sunday Times of London, where he co-wrote that 4-article series about the nuclear black market, including the Sibel Edmonds case. He's a regular writer at the Huffington Post. His newest one is The Personification of the Military-Industrial Racket, about John McCain's senior foreign policy advisor, Randy Scheunemann. And we'll be right back with Dr. Gordon Prather to talk about nuclear weapons right after this.